I've got the Arcam Radia A25 stereo integrated amplifier, bench test results. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasello with Audioholics. So I'm excited. I have a piece from Arcam. We've never formally done reviews of Arcam products before. We've never done bench tests, certainly. And I reached out to Audio Advice to send me this sample. So shout out to our channel partner, Audio Advice. And if you guys like this product and you would like to purchase it, we appreciate you using our affiliate links. It supports the channel and it gets Audio Advice to keep sending us more gear. So I wanted to show you this piece real quick before we get into the test report. So it's a slimline product. It's a type of product that you could fit on a credenza. And I just love the way it looks from a subjective standpoint only. I love the case on it. It's not the standard run-of-the-mill aluminum case that you see. It's pretty sturdy. I love the yellow accents, the halo on the volume control and on the input selector. That theme follows through on the top plate of the chassis as well as the remote control. And it's just, to me, it's a very sleek looking, cool looking product. So I know some people would be worried, well, how's this going to perform because it's small? Well, there's a lot of technology in this amplifier that allows it to punch above its weight class. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen with you. The full test report is on audioholics.com. I'll put a link in the video description below if you guys want to read all thoroughly through it. I'm just going to quickly go through the test results and hopefully explain some stuff that maybe people would be confused about. So let me share my screen here. Again, it's the Arcam A25 integrated amplifier, and these are the bench test results. There's a little overview video that Audio Advice did that you could check out as well, and I'll put a link to that. So let me just start with what this is. The Arcam Radia A25 is a Class G slimline stereo integrated amplifier. And what Class G does, it gives an advantage to efficiency because it's like a traditional linear AB design, but there's a low rail and a high rail. So most of the time when the amplifier is in idle or you're listening at low background levels, it'll be on that low rail. And as a result, it dissipates less power. So it's more efficient. And then when a large transient comes or you start cranking it up, it goes to the higher rail supply. And in the past, Class G has always been at a disadvantage when it switched from low to high rails just because it produced some harmonic nasties that you could see on a test bench and sometimes you could hear. But I'm talking decades ago. The Class G amplifier topology has really evolved over the years, and it's a more complex design than a simple linear AB. So there's more components in it. There's more things you can mess up if not engineered correctly. So there is cost involved. It costs more to produce a really good Class G as opposed to just a linear AB. And I just wanted to show you an internal look at this. You could see there's two capacitors that are 6,800 microfarads, and I think they're 50 volt. And then there's 10,000 microfarad capacitors, and those are 80 volts. So that's when it switches between the low and the high rail. It's got a toroid power transformer, and a lot of products like this in this category typically use an SMPS. There's some advantages to when you have a linear amplifier to still use a linear supply because you have more headroom that way. And I'll talk about that in the measurements. And then the other cool thing is this thing has a really high quality DAC. It's got the ESS, I think it's the 9280 Pro DAC, which is capable of handling up to 384 kilohertz, 32-bit sampling through the USB-C. And it also supports DSD. So this is very high quality, high resolution, and it has Toslink and coax, and even that's supported for 192.24. So it's important when I talk about it has a good DAC section. Will it match the preamp, the analog circuitry to take advantage of the DAC? And that's what I'm going to be showing you in these bench tests. So just a quick overview. Again, here's the back panel. You can see it's got 3 analog inputs. It's got a phono input. It's got preamp outputs, and it's got 1 pair of speaker outputs. And it's got 2 coax and 2 Toslink, and then the USB-C. So the first thing I want to show you is the, I looked at the preamp outputs. And just in case there was a use case where someone would buy it as a preamp, I wanted to see what the preamp output drive level would be to see if it could drive an amplifier to full power. And unfortunately, that's where this unit falls a little bit short. As you can see in my bench test, it starts clipping at around a volt, and it's about 1.04 at 0.1% and 1.1 at 1%. So the problem here is if you, with most amplifiers, usually have between 26 and 29 dB of gain, you need over 2 volts RMS to get these amplifiers at full power. So this preamp output's not strong enough to do that. And I don't recommend using this unit as a preamplifier. And I reached out to Arcam about this, and they said there was more meant, the left-right preouts are more meant for using for a subwoofer output. So if you want to add a couple of subwoofers to the system, you could do it with the preamp outputs, but there's no bass management on the preamp outputs. So my suggestion to Arcam in the next generation is, hey, get rid of the pre-outs, call it a sub out, and put bass management and delay and level control. I think people would find that really useful. But what is really impressive in this measurement is how low distortion that output is, the preamp output circuit. If you look at where it peaks right before clipping, we're at close to 100 dB synad or 0.001% THD, even lower than that actually. So that's a really clean preamp output. And I just wish it had more drive signal. But again, I don't think most people will be using this as a preamp. So I just wanted to kind of go over some of the negatives before we get into the positives here. So I looked at the DAC section. Now, when you have a high sampling rate, you don't really care too much about the out-of-band noise because it's so far out in the spectrum anyways. But what we have to do is look at when you're playing CD or Redbook or 44.1 kilohertz sampling rate, the filter has to be right past the passband. So 1/2 Nyquist would be 22 kilohertz. So I wanted to see if there's any nasties, because some DACs that are not implemented well, you get to see like a lot of noises or just nastiness after the passband. And you could see here it starts rolling off at 20 kilohertz where the test starts. It's a very gentle and gradual roll off, and there's no ringing in the filters in the reconstruction DAC. And there's no nasties in the high frequencies. This is very clean. So whoever did the digital design on this amplifier, they did a good job of keeping this clean. Now, this also has a moving magnet phono preamplifier. So most people don't measure phono stages, or most magazines don't measure it, but I do. And I use the RIA curve to basically linearize the response so you could see what you would be getting if you were plugging this in with a phono, a cartridge and everything, a whole system. So in this situation, I looked at the frequency response with a 1 millivolt drive, and it's very linear all the way out to the limit of my test equipment, which is 80 kilohertz or so. But there is a like a subsonic filter, so it starts rolling off. It's about 3 dB down at 20 hertz. Now, most of the time when I measure phono preamps, they're pretty linear up to 20 hertz, and then there's maybe a gentle roll-off below 10 hertz, subsonic filter. But I was talking to Arcam about this, and they said this was intentional. This is kind of a design practice that's used in the industry to put a subsonic filter like this. Now, I don't know what to think about that, to be honest with you, because I didn't do listening tests on this versus, let's say, a Yamaha or Marantz or an Anthem. But I've had all phono preamps of those competitors that are flat to 20 hertz. But some people might like this. Some people may not. But one thing that is good about this is it's a clean output here. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at the distortion, and I wanted to drive it at 1 millivolt and then at 5 millivolts. So the moving magnet phono cartridge produces anywhere from 3 to 6 millivolts, the typical cartridge. And if you look at this graph, I superimposed the distortion with a 1 millivolt drive and then with a 5 millivolt drive. And the 1 millivolt drive is the red and the blue, and it's very clean. You know, it's a clean output. I think the maximum distortion goes to like under 0.1% all the way to the limit of the bandwidth. That's a decent measurement. It's not the best I've seen with phono preamps. But when you drive it with a 5 millivolt signal, it basically goes to crap below 300 hertz. You see the distortion go way up to 5%. That's not pretty. I don't think the bass response would be good in that situation when you have a phono a moving magnet cartridge that's putting out a lot of output voltage. I think it could get a little messy there. Now, I brought this up to Arcam, and they told me that that was a situation that they had with pre-production units, that they've made a running change on this phono amp section, and they don't know how I got one with the old preamp. I don't know. I can't confirm it. I don't have another test sample, and I'm likely not going to be able to retest it. But I will tell you, I think their phono preamp section's a bit mediocre. If you're a real serious vinyl lover and you want to put together a kick-ass system for analog, you might want to consider getting an external phono preamp and using the preamp inputs of the A25 because they're very clean, and then just doing your own phono preamp thing. If that's what you're into, I think most people buying this product aren't even going to use a turntable. Could be wrong. Give me comments below if you agree or disagree. So next up, I wanted to look at the power amp section, and I drove it. It's rated at 100 watts a channel. So this is a full bandwidth measurement, 100 watts, both channels driven, below 0.1%, 2 channels, 8 ohms. And we're getting its rated power, and it's clean. And the roll-off is, you know, I think the 3 dB 0.70 kilohertz. And look, it's flat to 10 hertz. That's very good. That looks great. I look at an FFT at 1 watt. I like to look at things at low power to make sure there's low noise and distortion. This is a very clean signal. There is a little residual power supply after the rectifier circuit, as you can see it at 120 hertz, but it's minus 100 dB. I'm not going to give them a black eye for it. And then the leading harmonic distortion is second order, but it's 109 dB below the fundamental at 1 watt. This is clean. I mean, this is really good. You don't get this in a lot of products in this price class. So kudos there. So I ran a run of the sweep test, the run-of-the-mill sweep test at 8 ohms and 4 ohms, 2 channels driven. And I'll show you at 8 ohms at 1 kilohertz, we had 119 watts at 0.1%. Oh, I'm sorry, 119 watts at 1%, 113 watts at 0.1% with both channels driven. And that's above the rated power spec, so it's good. And then here's what's surprising. Look at the sign ad. That's very low. It's almost 100 dB. I'm thinking like 98 dB. If you look at the distortion, it's just a bit above 0.001%. That's through the preamp and the power amp. Now, my experience when I measure 2-channel receivers or even multi-channel receivers or even some integrated amps is the pre-outs tend to be much cleaner than the power amp section. The power amp section, when you add that into the fold, you'll see the distortion and noise rise. They didn't do that here. This is really good engineering. And again, when I was talking to Arcam, part of the black eye I gave them on the fact that they didn't have a high preamp output voltage, as you can see here, what they told me is they actually ran the volume control much higher in voltage so it could get the noise and distortion down. And then they stepped it back on the preamp outputs because they wanted to have the optimal drive for the amplifier stage, because you have to gain match the preamp to the power amp internally. That's what this is designed for. So as a result, they gave us some of the best noise and distortion that I've seen in a 2-channel integrated amplifier and receiver at this price class. Certainly, I'm very impressed with that. I always love when I'm surprised by products when I'm testing it, and I like that result. So that's a good result here. I'm going to show you the 4 ohm measurements, and you can see the class G switching more prominently with the 4 ohm one. But at 4 ohms, power sweep, 2 channels driven, it did an honest 157 watts, 167 watts at 1%, 157 at 0.1. It's rated for 150 at 4 ohms, both channels driven, so they beat their spec. But if you look right above 40 watts, you see how that there's like a little caret or a rise in the distortion. That's where it's switching from low rail to high rail. And look at how low the distortion is. We're talking 0.002%. That's excellent. I mean, in the old days when you would see a Class G amplifier, this would peg way higher than that, maybe 1% or higher. This is very clean. And look at the distortion versus power curve. Look at the knee. It's very linear all the way up to the knee. So this is a well-designed, well-engineered amplifier. This is a clean and honest power, almost to 150 watts with both channels driven at 4 ohms. And then you see the knee starts taking it up. So that's pretty good for something that's half the size of most products. I give them kudos to that. Now, here's another thing that surprised me is the dynamic power. When I ran burst tests that simulate music program material, we got 260 watts at 4 ohms with both channels driven. and 155 watts at 8 ohms with both channels driven. So that's almost 2 dB of dynamic headroom. That's the one advantage of a linear amplifier design with a linear power supply, is you tend to have more dynamic headroom than you would with a Class D using an SMPS. Sometimes with these Class D amplifiers, the continuous power is the same as the 1 kilohertz power is the same as the dynamic power. So you get what you get. You don't get any headroom above that. So that's one little advantage you still get with a linear design. And because it's a Class G design, the sensitivity, I'm sorry, the efficiency is probably close to 60 or 70% when it's at rated power. So there's definitely some advantages to efficiency, especially when using it in low power mode. I never felt like this amplifier got warm to the touch. The only time that it got warm was when I was really stressing it out with my test loads. But most of the time, it just ran cool. And you can see the power results here, the continuous full bandwidth power, 100 watts, 8 ohms, 154 ohms, the sweep test, all that stuff is here we just talked about. So now I want to go over the signal to noise ratio, how quiet the amplifier is. And in this test here, I basically put a 0 dB FS input signal, which is the maximum digital signal. I think it's equivalent to 1.1 volt or so. And I looked at the output, the speaker output at 8 ohms at 1 watt. And we got 95 dB. And that's excellent. That's really, I mean, going through the amp section and the preamp section, I usually see on these kind of products in the 80s. So this is very low noise. So you're not going to hear hissing coming out of this, even if you use high sensitivity speakers. That's just an excellent measurement. And then I basically recreated Arcam spec. They tested it at 0 dB FS with 50 watts, A rated. And I think they got on their spec 110 dB. I got 108. So I'm within 2 dB of what they measured. You could look at all the stuff here I talk about. I pretty much try to recreate anything that was on the spec sheet, and I got close within a dB or two. The other one that fell a little short was the Phono. When I tested it at 50 watts with a 5 millivolt input signal, I got 75 dB SNR, and they spec it at 80 dB. So it's a little bit off there. And then the crosstalk, the channel-to-channel separation. This is what basically makes sure that the left channel doesn't bleed into the right channel and vice versa. It looks like it's about greater than 85 dB at 1 kilohertz and 75 dB at 20 kilohertz. I think anything at very high frequency above 60 dB is sufficient. So this is very good. You know, you're going to have good isolation, good channel separation between them. So yeah, I like this product overall. I'm going to be doing some listening tests. I've got Revel F328, so I'm going to be hooking up. It's a little bit of that speaker is a little bit out of the class of this product, but you know, I try to just test it with a variety of stuff. Maybe I'll get some other speakers, but I'll give you guys a subjective report in a future date. I just wanted to give you a little bit more view of this here. See, I just love that top plate on it. And if my recommendation, if you guys are looking to pair this with speakers, I really think the JBL HDI 3600s or the 3800s, we reviewed those very favorably. I think that's a good pairing because those speakers have high sensitivity, they have good bass response. You don't even need a subwoofer at that point, and they sound great, and they'll run really well with this amplifier. Or even the Polk Reserve. I think this is another product we favorably reviewed. They have excellent bass response, and they're just good products. And they fit within the architecture of where you would put this in a family room or a multi-purpose room. But overall, I would say these are pretty good bench test results. I'm definitely going to be checking out more Arcam products in the future, perhaps some of their AVRs or some of their separate power amplifiers. But I give this product a thumbs up from what my bench tests reveal, and I can't wait for to give you guys some listening test results. And guys, if you like this video, please hit the thumb up, hit the subscribe. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest video topics. And until next time, my friends,